Hello and welcome to Module 7 Part 2, Child Care Program Operations. Our objectives for this module are to provide participants with a general review of the business of child care, including personnel management, program development, fiscal administration, and marketing, and an understanding of the rules and regulations that govern child care operations. So in this particular module, we are going to be focusing on facilities, operations, regulations, and quality improvement, and we're going to talk a lot about the day-to-day tasks that a program director does in order to run a center. So facilities are just the building that you run your program out of. It's important to note that different programs may operate out of different types of buildings, but the biggest thing is that facilities should meet the needs of the participants. When we're talking about program operations, we're really talking about the day-to-day business that a program director partakes in. So a daily schedule for a center director or a program director can really vary. So mornings may include greeting families, assisting in classrooms to cover ratios, or depending on the program type, transporting older children to school. Mid-mornings are usually focused on administrative duties like working on the budget, the finances, any paperwork that needs to get done, including maintaining and updating files, and scheduling. But it also could consist of covering in classrooms or assisting with any issues that may arise. In the afternoon, if the center is running smoothly, the director may continue administrative tasks, but as the evening winds down, they are back to greeting families, assisting with ratios, transporting school-age children if they have them, and facilitating the closing of the center. Being a program director is not typically a 9-to-5 job because you are in charge of everything. One of your biggest jobs is that you are responsible for licensing rules and regulations. So the director of the center is responsible for administering the center in accordance with licensing rules, and that director or substitute director of the center must be present at the center at least 60% of any day that that center is open. Additionally, licensing states that the director must plan and supervise the child development program, plan for participation in the selection of staff, plan for orientation and staff development, supervise and coordinate staff activities, evaluate staff performance, and participate in program activities. So it's a pretty heavy job that the program director does when they are the person in charge of running the center. When we talk about licensing, we know that licensing is based out of Colorado Department of Human Services in the Office of Early Childhood. And we also know that licensing is really just a baseline of rules that all programs must follow. Some of the most critical licensing regulations that we're going to talk about are adult-to-child ratios, staff qualifications, which we've already discussed, and health and safety regulations. Before you're choosing to open a center, it's important to understand and acknowledge that these regulations are there and that they need to be followed. So the first one that we're going to talk about is licensing ratios in terms of adult to children. So on this slide right here lists what the Colorado State licensing ratios are. NAEYC, which is a national organization, actually has recommendations for ratios that are lower. And it's also important to note that these are Colorado State's licensing ratios, and the licensing ratios actually differ among states. We've already talked about this last time when you guys did this scenario scavenger hunt. However, it's really important that we understand the different qualifications of who can be left alone with children and when. You can kind of look at this list and see, but there is, within the rules and regs, somebody who's director, early childhood teacher, assistant early childhood teacher, a staff aide, and then volunteers. Assistant early childhood teacher we talked about is something new that had just come into the licensing regulations, which is somebody who's working on becoming qualified, and essentially that person can be alone for 2 hours from the start of the program, 2 hours at the end of the program, and 1 hour for a lunch break. Health and safety is another big piece that we should be aware of. There's a lot of information on center policies and licensing rules and regs, and we talked about quite a bit of it when we talked about health, safety, and nutrition a few weeks back. I do want to point out that licensing inspections occur once a year unless otherwise noted, and what happens during that time is a licensor is going to walk both the inside and outside of the building. They're going to note ratios and teachers in classrooms, they're going to check student files, and check staff files. Essentially, they're looking for licensing violations. If there are none, great. If there are, your center is dinged and you are written up, and then you have to provide a response to licensing about how you are going to fix that ding. We're going to talk a little bit about Head Start because Head Start is different than licensing, and Head Start is actually programming that is all across the nation. But all Head Start programs have a unique set of regulations they must meet in order to qualify for funding, and sometimes they differ from licensing regulations, but not in a bad way. So typically Head Start regulations are more stringent than licensing regulations. For instance, this is the group size that is followed in Head Start and early Head Start classrooms. This is for preschools. Some other things that Head Start mandates that is a little bit different than licensing is teeth brushing. So children are required to brush their teeth twice a day or once a day, depending on the type of program. We are required to go on home visits. We have additional requirements for professional development and staff qualifications. If you want more information about the Head Start regulations, their website is listed on this slide. We're going to shift gears slightly and just talk about quality improvement. Every state has a quality improvement system. They're generally called QRIS, Quality Rating Improvement Systems. In the state of Colorado, ours is Colorado Shines. So Colorado Shines was born from a collaboration over several years with early childhood stakeholders across the country and state. And essentially, we took our Race to the Top funds and we decided to invest them in early childhood, and Colorado Shines was born. So these funds were used to create and now implement a new rating tool. Colorado Shines applies to all licensed child care centers and family child care homes, including Head Start programs. It's a point system with levels 1 through 5, and it does directly tie and relate back to Head Start performance standards. Oftentimes, Head Starts are automatically grandfathered in at a level 4 because a lot of what we are doing meets those quality improvement regulations and licensing regulations. So it is a points-based system. You are receiving points for workforce qualifications and professional development, your work on family partnerships, leadership, management, and administration, learning environment, child health. There are some other categories where you can get some additional points that include the home language, additional professional staff, professional leadership, and by having infant and toddler class observations done. So essentially programs are awarded points based on the documentation they upload into the system. So all licensed centers in the state of Colorado hold at least a level 1. So as long as you become a licensed center, you are already at a level 1. To move to a level 2, centers must have license in good standing, have staff registered in PDIS, have engaged in the self-assessment process, meet the quality indicators, and have completed Colorado Shines QRIS level 2 trainings. Levels 3 to 5 are determined by points, and they're verified by a quality ratings administrator. So essentially, when you go through the process of Colorado Shines, you're going through a process like this. You're including observation, documentation collection, classroom assessments, and surveys, and all of this information is uploaded into your account through Colorado Shines, and then somebody essentially does an assessment on you and determines how many points you receive for what. There are other types of accreditation that you can receive. So NAEYC is a national one, and this is an accreditation that is funded through NAEYC, and it's a national accreditation. So it's similar to Colorado Shines in the sense that you have some work to do at the program level, and then somebody comes out to observe you, and they're looking at what you have put together for documentation in terms of a portfolio. They're looking at surveys that are collected by families. They're looking at classroom observations, and they're coming out to review your program. All right, so we are done talking about quality rating improvement systems and Colorado Shines and what it means to be a program director. This week I'm going to ask that you go to this website, www.viacharacter.org, and complete a character strength survey. And then please print this off and don't bring it to class, but be prepared to talk about it at our next Zoom meeting, and we will talk about it at this week's Zoom meeting as well. I do want to go over Competency Statement 5. It can be a tricky competency statement for people and involves that you talk about information from both Module 4 and Module 7. So this is an I will statement focused on ensuring a well-run, purposeful program that is responsive to participants' needs. So you need to talk about how you will use assessment and documentation to observe children and plan appropriately. But you also need to talk about how you will adhere to licensing rules and regulations and how you will adhere to mandated reporting. You also need to talk about how you're going to maintain effective professional relationships with peers, families, and community members. So this competency statement encompasses a lot, but just focus on how you're going to keep your program well run and purposeful, and that you will be responsive to not only children but families as well. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks, guys.